The bride's veil caught the dust storm rising behind her as she stumbled, finally collapsing in a heap of white taffeta and blood on the hard, packed earth outside Rowan Ziegler's isolated cabin. Rowan had been chopping wood, axe raised mid-swing, when he spotted the ghostly figure materialize from the swirling yellow haze. He dropped his tool, momentarily wondering if the desert heat had finally gotten to him after 5 years of solitary ranching in the Arizona territory. But as he approached cautiously, the crumpled form became unmistakably real, a woman in a wedding dress, face bruised, lip split, and a trail of crimson seeping from beneath her hairline. Without hesitation, he gathered her into his arms. Her body felt impossibly light against his chest, fragile as a bird with broken wings. Miss, can you hear me?" Rowan's voice was rough from disuse as he carried her toward his cabin. The nearest town was 30 miles away, and he rarely had visitors out this far. Her eyes fluttered open briefly, revealing irises the color of summer storm clouds. "Please," she whispered before losing consciousness again, her head falling against his shoulder. Inside his modest cabin, Rowan gently laid her on his bed, the only proper piece of furniture he owned besides a table and chair. The year was 1876, and out here on the frontier, luxuries were few. He fetched water from the barrel by the door and dampened a clean cloth, carefully wiping away the blood and dust from her face. In the fading afternoon light streaming through his single window, he could see she was beautiful despite her injuries. Her hair, falling loose from what must have been an elegant arrangement, was the color of burnished copper. Freckles dusted across her nose and cheeks beneath the bruising. Rowan worked methodically, cleaning her wounds with the gentleness that belied his rough exterior. At 32, he'd spent the last decade hardening himself against the unforgiving frontier. But something about this mysterious bride stirred protective instincts he thought long buried. As darkness fell, the woman stirred, her eyes opening wide with panic as she tried to sit up. "Easy now," Rowan said, keeping his distance so as not to frighten her further. "You're safe here." "Where am I?" Her voice cracked, and he quickly offered her water, which she drank greedily. "My ranch, about 30 miles southwest of Tucson. I'm Rowan Ziegler." She stared at him, seemingly weighing whether to trust him with her name. "Olivia," she finally said. "Olivia Morley." She glanced down at her tattered wedding dress. "Or at least I was supposed to be Olivia Thornton today. What happened to you, Miss Morley?" Her hands trembled as she touched her split lip. "I ran. I had to." Tears welled in her eyes. "Vernon, my fiancé, he showed his true nature just before the ceremony. When I told him I couldn't marry him, he—" She gestured to her face. Rowan's jaw tightened. "He did this to you." She nodded, a tear tracking down her cheek. "I took his horse and rode as fast and far as I could. I think I got lost in that dust storm. You're lucky you found my place. Not much out here but rattlesnakes and cactus." He stood, moving to the stove. "You must be hungry." "I don't have much, but there's stew." As he ladled the simple meal into a bowl, Rowan considered the situation. A battered bride miles from anywhere, with potentially an angry groom in pursuit. The nearest law was in Tucson, and Sheriff Miller was known more for his card playing than his dedication to justice. "Mr. Ziegler?" Her voice pulled him from his thoughts. "Just Rowan is fine." "Rowan, then. I have no right to ask, but might I stay here tonight? I have nowhere else to go." He handed her the bowl. "You can stay as long as you need to heal up. Then I'll take you wherever you want to go." Relief flooded her face. "Thank you. I can work, cook, clean, whatever you need. I won't be a burden." Rowan shook his head. "Rest first. We'll figure out the rest later." That night, Rowan slept on the floor near the door, his rifle within reach, listening to the desert winds howl outside. He wondered what kind of man would harm a woman like Olivia on what should have been the happiest day of her life. But he knew such men existed. The frontier was full of them, men who mistook cruelty for strength. Morning came with the first golden rays spilling through the window, illuminating Olivia's face as she slept. The swelling had gone down slightly, though the bruises had darkened to purple and blue. Rowan moved quietly, starting coffee and checking outside for any signs of visitors. When Olivia woke, she seemed momentarily disoriented before remembering where she was. "Good morning," she said, attempting to smooth her tangled hair. "Morning," Rowan replied, offering her coffee. "How are you feeling?" "Like I've been trampled by cattle," she admitted with a small smile that didn't reach her eyes. "But better than yesterday." After a simple breakfast, Olivia insisted on helping with chores. Rowan found her some clothes, an old shirt and trousers that had belonged to his younger brother before he died in the war. They were too large for her small frame, but she cinched them with rope and rolled up the sleeves. "These will do nicely," she said, emerging from behind the makeshift curtain he'd hung for privacy. "Better for work than a wedding dress." "You don't have to work," Rowan protested. "I want to," she replied firmly. "I need to keep busy, otherwise I'll just think about." She trailed off, her eyes clouding with painful memories. Over the next few days, they fell into an unexpected rhythm. Olivia proved herself capable and hardworking, taking over the cooking and mending clothes that Rowan had neglected for years. She was educated, he discovered, having been a schoolteacher before her engagement. In the evenings, she read aloud from the few books he owned, her voice bringing the stories to life in a way he'd never experienced. Rowan found himself sharing more about his own life than he had with anyone in years, how he'd come west after the war, unable to face his family after his brother's death. How he'd worked cattle drives and as a deputy before saving enough to buy this small piece of land. How he'd built the cabin with his own hands. On the 5th day, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the desert in fiery hues, Olivia asked, "Do you ever get lonely out here?" Rowan considered the question. "Used to think solitude was what I wanted. Now I'm not so sure," she nodded, understanding in her eyes. "I came west to escape, too. My parents died in a fever outbreak back in Philadelphia. I had nothing left there." "What will you do now?" Rowan asked, the question that had been hovering between them. Before she could answer, the distant sound of hoofbeats interrupted their conversation. Rowan was on his feet instantly, hand moving to the pistol at his hip. "Get inside," he instructed, his voice low but urgent. Olivia's face had gone pale. "Do you think it's him?" "Don't know, but best not to take chances." 3 riders approached, silhouetted against the darkening sky. Rowan positioned himself on the porch, one hand resting casually near his gun. As they drew closer, he recognized the man in front, Vernon Thornton, a wealthy cattle baron from Tucson with a reputation for ruthlessness in business. "Evening, gentlemen," Rowan called out, his voice deceptively calm. "Something I can help you with?" Thornton, a large man with cold eyes and an expensive suit now covered in trail dust, dismounted. The 2 men with him remained on horseback, hands hovering near their weapons. "I believe you're harboring my fiancé, Ziegler," Thornton said, his cultured voice at odds with the menace in his expression. "I've come to take her home." "Don't recall inviting you onto my property," Rowan replied evenly, "and the lady isn't interested in going with you." Thornton's face darkened. "She's confused, hysterical. Women get these notions sometimes." "The only notion she has is the bruises you left on her face," Rowan said, dropping all pretense of civility. "She's not going anywhere with you." The door opened behind him and Olivia stepped out, chin raised despite the fear evident in her eyes. "I am not your fiancé, Vernon. I never will be." Thornton's facade cracked, rage contorting his features. "You ungrateful, that's enough," Rowan cut in, stepping between them. "You heard the lady, now get off my land." One of Thornton's men drew his pistol, but Rowan was faster, his gun already aimed. "I wouldn't," he warned quietly. For a tense moment, no one moved. Then Thornton smiled, a cold expression that didn't reach his eyes. "This isn't over, Ziegler." "Nobody takes what's mine." "She was never yours," Rowan replied, "and threatening a man on his own property isn't wise, even for someone with your money." Thornton spat on the ground. "You'll regret this, both of you." He mounted his horse with surprising grace for a man his size. "I'll be back." They watched the three riders depart, dust billowing behind them. Only when they were specks on the horizon did Rowan holster his weapon. "He will come back," Olivia said softly. "Vernon doesn't lose gracefully." "Then we'll be ready," Rowan assured her, though his mind was already calculating the odds. 3 armed men against 1 was poor gambling, even for a skilled shooter. That night neither of them slept well. Rowan kept watch by the window, rifle across his lap. Olivia sat at the table, mending one of his shirts with precise, nervous stitches. "I should leave," she said suddenly. "This isn't your fight." Rowan shook his head. "Where would you go?" "I don't know. Further west, perhaps California, alone, with no money, no protection." He turned to face her. "That's not a solution, Olivia, and staying here puts you in danger." Her voice broke slightly. "I won't have more blood on my hands." Rowan crossed the room, kneeling beside her chair. "What do you mean?" She set aside her sewing, hands twisting in her lap. "Back in Philadelphia, after my parents died, Vernon was visiting on business. He seemed kind, generous. Offered me a new start out west as his wife." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I was so desperate to escape my grief that I didn't see the signs until we arrived in Tucson." "What signs?" "His temper. The way he spoke about his first wife, who died under mysterious circumstances, how his servants flinched when he entered a room." She drew a shaky breath. "The day before our wedding, his valet tried to warn me. Vernon caught him. The poor man was beaten so severely." She couldn't continue. Rowan covered her trembling hands with his own. "None of that is your fault, isn't it? I chose not to see what was right in front of me." "You're seeing clearly now," Rowan said gently, "and you're not alone anymore." Their eyes met, and something shifted between them, a recognition, perhaps, of kindred wounded spirits. Before either could speak, a flicker of movement outside the window caught Rowan's attention. "Get down," he yelled, pulling Olivia to the floor as a gunshot shattered the window glass. He reached for his rifle, returning fire toward the muzzle flash in the darkness. "Crawl to the back room," he instructed Olivia, who was trembling but clear-eyed. "I won't leave you," she insisted. Another shot splintered wood near Rowan's head. He fired twice more, hearing a satisfying cry of pain from outside. "Ziegler," Thornton's voice called from the darkness. "Send her out and you might live through the night." "Not happening, Thornton," Rowan shouted back, moving to another window for a different angle. He could make out 2 figures now, Thornton behind a large rock, one of his men lying motionless in the dirt. The third was nowhere to be seen. The realization came too late as the back door splintered open. Olivia screamed as the third man grabbed her, pulling her roughly to her feet. Rowan spun, aiming his rifle, but hesitated. The man was using Olivia as a shield, a knife at her throat. "Drop it, Ziegler," the man growled, "or I'll cut her pretty neck." Slowly, Rowan lowered his weapon to the floor. "Let her go. This is between me and Thornton." "Actually," Thornton said, entering through the front door with his pistol drawn, "it's between me and my wayward bride. You're just an inconvenience." Olivia's eyes met Rowan's, and in that moment he saw not fear but determination. As Thornton approached, she suddenly went limp in her captor's arms, throwing him off balance. Rowan seized the opportunity, launching himself at the man, knocking the knife away as they crashed to the floor. Thornton fired, the bullet grazing Rowan's shoulder. Before he could fire again, Olivia grabbed a cast iron skillet from the stove and swung it with all her might, connecting with Thornton's head. The cattle baron crumpled to the floor. Rowan, meanwhile, had subdued the other man with a series of punches that left him unconscious. Breathing heavily, he got to his feet, clutching his bleeding shoulder. "Are you all right?" Olivia asked, rushing to his side. "I've had worse," he grimaced. "That was some swing." "My father believed in teaching his daughter self-defense," she replied with a shaky smile. "Though usually with proper boxing technique, not cookware." They secured Thornton and his remaining henchmen with rope, tying them back to back. Rowan's wound was painful but not serious. The bullet had only torn through flesh. "We need to get to town," Rowan said as Olivia bandaged his shoulder. "Sheriff Miller may be useless, but Judge Parker will listen." Attempted murder and kidnapping are hanging offenses. Vernon has friends in high places, Olivia warned. Money speaks louder than justice in some courts. Not in Judge Parker's court, Rowan assured her. He's known as the hanging judge for a reason. No man is above his law. They loaded the prisoners onto horses at first light, Thornton still groggy and cursing from the blow to his head. The ride to Tucson was tense, with Rowan constantly scanning their surroundings for any sign of the third man who had escaped during the firefight. The town was just waking up when they arrived, early shopkeepers and saloon stragglers stopping to stare at the unusual procession. Rowan took their prisoners directly to the jailhouse, where a sleepy deputy named Collins took one look at Thornton and visibly paled. "Mr. Thornton is being charged with attempted murder and kidnapping," Rowan stated firmly. "I want them locked up until Judge Parker arrives next week." "I can't just," Collins began, but Rowan cut him off. "You can and you will, or you can explain to the judge why you released them." That seemed to decide the matter. Collins reluctantly locked both men in cells, though he placed Thornton in the more comfortable one usually reserved for drunks to sleep it off. As they left the jailhouse, Olivia squeezed Rowan's hand. "Thank you." "For what?" "For believing me, for fighting for me. Most men wouldn't have." "I'm not most men," he replied simply. They found rooms at the modest hotel, needing rest after the night's ordeal. As they stood in the hallway between their doors, an awkward silence fell between them. "What will you do now?" Rowan asked, echoing his question from before. Olivia considered for a moment. "I'm not sure. I could try to find a teaching position somewhere." "Or," Rowan said hesitantly, "you could come back to the ranch, not just to hide out but to stay." Her eyes widened. "Are you asking me to?" "I'm asking you to consider it," he said quickly. "The place needs a woman's touch, and he faltered, unused to expressing such feelings. "I've grown accustomed to your company." A smile touched her lips. "That's quite an offer, Mr. Ziegler." "Just think about it," he said, suddenly embarrassed by his boldness. "I will," she promised. The week waiting for Judge Parker's arrival passed slowly. Thornton's lawyer arrived from Phoenix, making veiled threats and offering bribes to anyone who would listen. But when the imposing judge took his seat in the Tucson courthouse, the atmosphere changed. Judge Isaac Parker had a reputation for fairness, but also for harsh punishment of those who broke the law, regardless of their station. The trial was brief but thorough. Olivia testified with quiet dignity about Thornton's abuse and the attack on the ranch. Rowan's testimony corroborated her story, his straightforward manner earning the judge's respect. Several of Thornton's former servants, emboldened by his arrest, came forward with tales of cruelty that shocked even the hardened frontier town. In the end, Judge Parker's verdict was swift and severe. Vernon Thornton was sentenced to 20 years in the territorial prison for attempted murder, kidnapping, and assault. His accomplice received 10 years. As Thornton was led away in chains, he fixed Olivia with a look of pure hatred. "This isn't over," he hissed. "I'll find you both when I get out." "In 20 years," Judge Parker interjected coldly, "you may find the world has forgotten you entirely, Mr. Thornton." Outside the courthouse, in the bright Arizona sunshine, Olivia took a deep breath of freedom. "It's really over," she said wonderingly. "It is," Rowan agreed, offering her his arm. "Have you thought about my proposal?" "I have," she replied, falling into step beside him, "but I have conditions." "Name them." "First, the cabin needs more windows. It's far too dark in there." A smile tugged at Rowan's lips. "Done." "Second, we need proper furniture. At least one comfortable chair for reading. Seems reasonable." "Third," she said, stopping to face him, "I won't be just your housekeeper, Rowan Ziegler. If I'm to stay, it would be as your partner in all things." His expression softened. "I wouldn't want it any other way, Olivia Morley." "Then yes," she said simply. "I'll stay." They were married 3 days later by the same judge who had sentenced Thornton. The ceremony was small, attended only by a few townsfolk who had supported them during the trial. Olivia wore a simple blue dress rather than white, a symbolic break from her past. As they traveled back to their ranch now, Olivia marveled at how dramatically her life had changed in just 2 weeks. From a bride fleeing violence to a wife entering a marriage of mutual respect and growing affection. "What are you thinking?" Rowan asked as the cabin came into view on the horizon. "That sometimes you have to get lost to find where you truly belong," she replied, her hand finding his. The years that followed were not without challenges. The ranch flourished under their combined efforts, expanding from a modest homestead to a respectable cattle operation. They added rooms to the cabin as their family grew, first a daughter with Olivia's copper hair and Rowan's quiet determination, then twin boys who brought laughter and chaos in equal measure. Thornton died in prison 6 years into his sentence, news that brought Olivia neither joy nor sorrow, but simply closure. The past, with all its shadows, finally receded completely. On their 10th anniversary, as they sat on the expanded porch of what was now a proper ranch house, watching their children chase fireflies in the twilight, Rowan took Olivia's hand. "You ever regret it?" he asked, "collapsing at my doorstep?" She laughed, the sound as free and clear as the desert sky above them. "That's quite possibly the strangest anniversary question I've ever heard." "You know what I mean," he said, squeezing her fingers gently. Olivia looked out at their home, their children, the life they had built together from such unlikely beginnings. "Not for a single moment," she answered truthfully. "Some people search their whole lives for what I found when I fell in the dust at your feet. And what's that?" He asked, though he knew the answer. "Home," she said simply, leaning her head against his shoulder as the first stars appeared overhead. "I found my way home." In the vastness of the Arizona territory, where so many came seeking fortune or fleeing their past, they had discovered something far more precious, a love born of compassion and courage, tested by fire, and strengthened with each passing season. What had begun with a bruised bride collapsed in the dust had blossomed into a life neither could have imagined on that fateful day, a life built on trust, respect, and an enduring love that, like the land itself, grew more beautiful with each passing year.